And welcome to Telewizja Republika. Drone attack devastates Odessa. In a tragic overnight assault on March 2nd, Russian drones targeted the Ukrainian city of Odessa, leading to the death of 12 individuals, including 5 children. The attack caused significant damage to a multi-story building, demolishing 18 apartments and trapping residents under the debris. 8 people sustained injuries from the incident, one of whom was a child. The casualties included a woman and her 7-month-old infant, a 4-month-old baby, a 3-year-old child, and 2 siblings aged 9 and 8. Odessa Oblast Governor Olaf Scholz, expressing his sorrow over the incident, described this as a horrific tragedy for both Odessa and Ukraine at large. The rescue efforts concluded on the evening of March 3rd. Widespread impact of March 2 drone attacks are extended beyond Odessa, affecting several other Ukrainian oblasts, including Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and Sumy. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that out of 17 Shahed-type drones deployed in these attacks, 14 were successfully intercepted and shot down. In response to these escalations, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged allied nations to expedite the provision of military support to Ukraine, highlighting the detrimental effect of political disputes on the nation's defense capabilities. Russian aviation activities decrease amid losses. According to Institute for the Study of War, there has been a notable decrease in Russian aviation activities in eastern Ukraine, possibly as a consequence of significant aircraft losses inflicted by Ukrainian air defense. Ukrainian Air Force Commander Lieutenant General Mykola Leszczuk reported a complete halt in Russian aviation activities in eastern Ukraine on the evening of March 2nd, following the downing of another 2 Russian Su-34 aircraft. This trend of decreased activity persisted into March 3rd, emphasized by the absence of A-50 long-range radar detection aircraft, especially after one such aircraft was destroyed after several others were destroyed before. The Ukrainian military has documented the loss of 15 Russian aircraft since February 17, a significant figure given Russia's fleet size. The reduction in aviation operations reflects a cautious approach by Russian forces, although the duration of this decrease remains uncertain, according to Institute for Study of War. Ukrainian military intelligence specialists hack Russian defense servers. They gain insights into the complete organizational structure of the Russian ministry. This operation unveiled the identities of generals, high-ranking officials, and various other personnel who relied on electronic document management system. This hack has provided Ukraine with access to sensitive documents, including those belonging to Russia's Deputy Defense Minister, Timur Ivanov, marking a kind of advantage, at least in this IT sector, in the ongoing conflict. As this happens in a strategic move, on March 4th, Ukrainian forces claimed responsibility for damaging railway bridge in Russia's southwestern Samara region. This bridge was reportedly used by Russia to transport military cargo, underscoring Kyiv's efforts to disrupt logistical routes essential for the Russian military's operation. The attack led to suspension of rail traffic in the area, indicating the ongoing tactical warfare beyond the Russian front lines on the territory of Russia. Post-invasion Russia has significantly, on the other hand, expanded its network of spies, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. The Federal Security Service, infamous FSB, has recovered from initial setbacks and has strengthened its foreign intelligence capabilities, reports Wall Street Journal. European security experts note an increase in the FSB's operational effectiveness, with an emphasis on military counterintelligence through its 3rd Directorate. This expansion and collaboration among Russian intelligence agencies signal a more assertive stance in international espionage and internal security enforcement. Speaking of which, an investigation is underway in Germany following the leak of an audio recording that revealed discussions among German military officers regarding support for Ukraine, including the potential supply of Taurus missiles. This leak, which is considered a serious matter by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, highlights the deliberations with Germany regarding its level of involvement in Ukraine conflict. The fact is that this information and this leak is in a way supporting Olaf Scholz's position that is actually visible for many, many months. Because basically this leak confirms that Russia does not want Germany to be involved, and that any kind of involvement of Germany or the Western forces directly on the territory of Ukraine could trigger Russia to went or to go ballistic. The UK Ministry of Defense, in the meantime, has estimated the number of Russian losses. It has suffered over 355,000 casualties in the ongoing war in Ukraine, what reflects the intense nature of this conflict. This figure, which includes both dead and wounded, underscores the significant human cost of the war and the strategic implications of Russia's approach to the conflict. But on the other hand, everyone who is interested in Russia's history and the way that Russia wages wars must know the Russian saying, "Людей у нас много," which was famously used or infamously used by Joseph Stalin, who was, by the way, called Uncle Joe by the Westerners while he was murdering his own people and people of many other nations during his years in power. Людей у нас много means there are lots of people in Russia, which basically means that this state, this criminal state, can throw any number of bodies on the trenches and on the machine guns of the opponents, because they count that no matter how many people they will send to death, the opponent will be a smaller military power. And that means that in the war of attrition, Russia counts on the number of its citizens and basically number of dead people as a way to win any war. To analyze and to understand what is happening between Ukraine and Russia, this number and this approach must be taken into account by anyone who tries to understand what in reality is going on between Russia and Ukraine. That's our Substack, rackracon.com. You can leave us your email. We will come back to you with the reports from the front line of the ongoing war against the West, and that's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał Rachon, and this is Rackracon. And we roll it.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
It's Monday. So Joe Lindsley is again on Telewizja Republika to talk about the latest developments during this Russian aggression against Ukraine. Joe, welcome back to Telewizja Republika. Many times you mentioned that the world media try to omit the information that are undoubtedly big news. And the thing regarding the shutting down of Russian aircrafts by Ukrainians is the big news. It's even hard to figure out how many precise, what's the precise number of the aircrafts that were shot down lately by Ukrainian air defense. We've heard about 10 aircrafts in 10 days, and then on the next 3 days we've had another info regarding this activities, and we've just quoted Institute for Study of War claiming that that caused Russia to change its tactics and simply do not send certain types of aircrafts over the Ukraine. So what do you make of it?
Well, Michał, hello from Kyiv, and this certainly is one of the major success stories. I would say there's two major headlines that could be all over the world right now. One, Russia's second annual winter offensive has failed. It's March here in Kyiv. the weather, you can feel the turning towards spring. And yet, despite all the global expert predictions, there were no successful Russian infrastructure attacks on Ukrainian cities the entire winter. There was power, there was electricity, there was heat. It's now spring. That is a major story. Perhaps in coincident with this, we've had the Ukrainian attacks on Russian ships in the Black Sea, and especially since New Year's, many successful Ukrainian blows on the Russian Air Force, including in January, at the very least, three of Russia's 24 sort of most critical surveillance planes were destroyed, A-50s and IL-76. And then lately, as we've seen, the past, I'd say 11 or 12 days, at least 10, it seems, Russian fighter jets, Su-34, as well as yet another A-50 plane, which helps to coordinate the strikes. Now, some of the corroboration of this comes from Russian Telegram channels where Russians are complaining about this happening. So we do see, enough sort of evidence that this is not something that's totally made up. Furthermore, if you look back, you always have to look at the absence of activity. So even, for example, looking at this Russia's failed winter offensive, which should be a concept that everyone's talking about. How often have we talked about Ukraine's offensive last summer? That was such a popular trope. Everyone loves to talk about it and analyze it. Well, what about Russia's failed winter offensive? Everyone was predicting it. It hasn't happened. And if you look at the activity, around New Year's weekend, Russia had major horrific attacks on Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv and many places. And everyone sort of saw that and said, oh, this is a new turning in the war. Russia's going to keep doing this every week. And they haven't. It's been several weeks of calm here in Kyiv. We did have a Russian terroristic attack on Odessa on Friday night, in which they used not jets or missiles, but they used the Iranian-made suicide drones. They killed at least 6 or 7 or maybe 8 children in Odessa in a flat. So that's still happening, but we're not seeing major nationwide missile attacks upon Ukraine, and this suggests that that there is perhaps a weakness, and maybe indeed these Russian jets.
Why don't we see it? Because our viewers remember us discussing it, that you were pointing to this thing last year in 2023 for a couple of months, and then the attack that you just mentioned came. It was a huge attack. That's true. But again, since then, we do not see the same kind of hits, the scale of this, the hits of that scale. What does it suggest if we add the information about downing of the surveillance aircraft, simply the Russian style AWACS planes that coordinate this kind of major Air Force operations?
Well, Mio, even Russia's New Year's bombing spree did not hurt Ukrainian infrastructure. A case in point, like every time I'm in Kyiv now, and many tall buildings here, every time I take an elevator, I'm starting to remember 1 year ago, it was scary to take an elevator because there was a great chance you're going to get stuck for several hours. And there were care packages in almost every elevator in this and many cities around the country with water and books and food, because people would routinely get stuck for hours. Students were studying by candlelight. There was no hot water for many people, no electricity most hours of the day. None of that happened, even with Russia's massive New Year's attack. None of that happened throughout Ukraine. So this is certainly a success for Ukraine, protecting. Ukrainians were much more protected this winter than last winter. Now, that said, as I called, Russia's attack on Odessa, it was illegal immigrants, illegal invading Russians, murdering Odessa Christians. So the Russians are still doing this at the margins and still causing terror. But they really sent. If you go back and look at what Ukrainians began to do to the Russian Black Sea fleet in August and September. They began to hit so many ships. Not only did they open up the grain corridor, Ukrainians are exporting right now more grain per month through the Black Sea than they did when they had the so-called deal with Russia and brokered by United Nations and Turkey. So Ukrainians are, I mean, these are major, major success
Yeah,
stories.
so the best way to deal with Russia in terms of this kind of stuff is just have enough muscle power to fight through the routes that you are allowed to do. So that's the best way to deal with those bastards.
Yeah, but then we also need to be very sharp on the propaganda war. And the Russians are week by week they control the narrative. So in January, there was the space of 1 week where Ukrainians took down 3 of Russia's 24 most critical planes that orchestrate nationwide missile attacks. That's a huge headline. But that headline was totally obscured by a story that the Russians seem to have made up with incredible bravado. The Russians said, Ukrainians shot down a plane with 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war. There is zero evidence of it. Even if you look at the photographs of the wreckage, you don't see any evidence of bodies. There's nothing. But yet that we allowed that to become the major topic.
Yeah, let me interrupt you here for a second, because when I was doing research for our Today program, and I remember, and I'm glad that you just mentioned, I remember couple of breaking news from last weeks about shooting down those surveillance planes, and it's obvious that there were official claims of shooting down, as far as I remember, 3 of this kind of aircrafts in last month. When you Google the news about this event, you can hardly find information that only 1 was shot down, which is also very interesting because you do not lose this kind of aircraft on a daily basis, and when you lose it, it's a big thing, it's a big news. So for some reason, it is very difficult to find information that huge success of this scale was a part of the Ukrainian military, or actually aviation, or the ground forces that fight this kind of threats. It's a big success, and still, when we go to the global narrative, well, it's hardly possible to find anything or almost anything about it. You have to dig really deep.
And first, we don't know how the Ukrainians have brought down these jets. Are they MacGyvering weapons and old equipment they've been given? We don't know. It has to be done with ingenuity. But more than that, if you Google Ukrainian POWs Russian plane, you'll find lots of stories. And every program I was on, that was the question I was always asked. Back in late January, what do you think of the Ukrainian POWs in the plane? And this seems to have been a totally made-up story. And the Russians are very good at this. Instead of, they don't want the headline to be, 3 of Russia's 24 most powerful planes, and now 4, by the way, have been destroyed. They don't want that to be the headline. And so they just brazenly make up a story saying, there were Ukrainian prisoners of war in the plane. And the media, without thinking, rushes and follows that story. This is the same thing we see right now with this leak. It seemed from Germany.
Yeah, that's another very interesting thing. We just mentioned it in our opening monologue, but this is one of these injections into the Western infosphere, totally made by the Russian side. So whatever comments we do have on this issue in the Western hemisphere, in the Western infosphere, we are actually playing by the rules that were designed in Kremlin, and that's interesting also from the standpoint of German Chancellor admitting that this kind of thing happened, which is basically adding petrol to the fire with this kind of statements by the German Chancellor. I really have problem with understanding it. Even if German Bundeswehr made those kind of shocking errors, let's put it this way, if it's not a kind of a sophisticated game, which is always possible when it comes to relations between Germany and Russia.
Well, for example, Michal, if I wasn't here in Ukraine and just sitting in California or something, and I simply read, for example, the BBC or any story, the BBC stories say about the leaked recording of German officials talking about if the German Taurus missiles being able to hit, say, the Kerch Bridge or places in occupied Crimea, I could just see that. I would say, Germans are plotting, to help Ukraine hit Russian military bases. But here's the thing. That's exactly what the Germans are. That's why they won't give the Taurus missiles. So the responsible media is very irresponsible by not pointing out this fact. Like what that leaked recording just corroborated is everything that Scholz has been saying, is that they don't want to give Ukraine Taurus missiles because they don't want Ukraine to hit Russian military
That's exactly
bases.
my
But the
point.
Russians
So it
and
looks
the
like a
media
kind of a
that has
media
helped
setup. I don't
Yeah,
claim
the
that
media,
it is a setup, but the way that this is being, that the story is being told is actually confirming and giving excuses to Olaf Scholz about not giving those Taurus missiles and not giving the weapons that he doesn't want to give for months. We remember all the leaked information about the assessment of the German military intelligence about the future attack of Russia against West. All of those things looks like the patterns that we are talking about. All those leaks look like a one big excuse for Germany not to act, not to help Ukraine.
Yeah, indeed, because then they could say, "Oh, look, we were right to be afraid because look, Russia responds with mean words," and this is why Kaja Kallas, the Prime Minister of Estonia, she said a couple of days ago, "We should not be afraid of our own power, and we should not overestimate Russia's power. The fear of escalation leads us to make ourselves smaller than we are." And we have to, we get scared by words, but like if you don't cross red lines, you cannot win. The only Ukrainians have crossed red lines. They use the Storm Shadow missiles from the United Kingdom, the long-range missiles, to hit the headquarters of Russia's Navy, the Black Sea Fleet. That was in September. What was Russia's great response since then? Did they nuke the world? No. And then piece by piece, Ukrainians chip away. Now they're chipping away at Russia's jets that have been bringing hellfire. They were bringing hellfire upon Ukraine. And you can even feel it. There's a noticeable decline in the air raid alarms we have around the country.
I mean, it's a big story. When we came to the conclusion after we just entered the third year of the war, that the official analysis that all media is building its view on the situation on the front line, and we do it as well. The Institute for Study of War is a really good source of information about it. When they claim that Russia had to withdraw their aircraft from the Ukrainian airspace because they lost more than 10 in 10 days, this is a big news. I mean, it means something.
Yeah, and it would be precisely in these moments of weakness when you could double down and support and move this along to a conclusion that means victory. It was the same story where, all last fall, up until the Hamas attacks on Israel, the skies were very quiet over Ukraine, and Ukraine had forced Russia's navy to flee Crimea and to move to mainland Russia. That was extraordinary. The navy was on the run. That was the time to double down. The United States during that period sent 17 long-range ATACMS weapons. That's it, and then forgot about it. And so this is, and then even right now, for example, the Biden administration, they could do so much. They don't need the permission of Congress to send long-range weapons at their disposal, to send ammunition to Ukraine. They could do all of that, and they're not. They're missing these opportunities, and this is exactly why it sort of fuels the Republican opposition to the White House Ukraine policy, because your average person in America sees, well, we're just spending money for what? They don't, partly because the media obscures Ukraine's successes, but also because the White House and sort of leadership doesn't take advantage of these moments of Russian weakness to really put the pressure on. And Russia, holds their best propaganda stories for those moments of weakness so that they can control the narrative. I mean, the past like 12 or so days, you had so much of the world and wall-to-wall television coverage focused on the death of one Russian. I won't even say his name. Everyone knows it now. They're all focused on the death of one Russian. Oh, poor brave guy, while ignoring, the daily sacrifice of Ukrainians, of, the Ukrainian children murdered in their beds, of the Ukrainian people who, for example, still live in Kharkiv, despite the regular missile attacks that were happening. They haven't happened in several weeks on that city. The people who live in defiance and say, we insist on being free, And the Russians have successfully diverted attention from these amazing stories to one single Russian, and also ignoring how at least now, 10, 12, 13 of their planes have been destroyed in just a matter of weeks.
I totally agree with you, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. And I would add another thing, that on our program months ago, Ahmed Zakayev, the Prime Minister of Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, mentioned that for 150 million of 140 million nation of Russia, we had back in the days of in the previous days, let's put it this way, we had like, I don't know, 15, 20,000, even 100,000 people protesting at some point in Russia against Vladimir Putin. Come on, even 100,000 people against, in a scale of 150 million people, and now on this Russians imperialist, because Alexei Navalny was actually supporting all the imperial ambitions of Russia, including claiming that Crimea belongs to Russia, not to Ukraine. We've heard about thousands of people. If that's the event of that scale, as the West hopes, why the number is so small? Well, the answer is clear, because Russians in general support Vladimir Putin, support criminal activity in Ukraine, support criminal activities in Caucasus, in Chechnya, in Georgia, in many other places. That's basic fact, and that's a fact of the responsibility of regular Russians, as it was a responsibility of regular Germans during the Second World War, and no one wants to admit it in the West.
Yeah, and it's a responsibility of anyone in a free society to stand up to tyranny. And that's what Ukrainians did, especially starting in 2014. They faced the bullets of the secret police, and that's why they're not part of a Russian army now. That's why they're facing billions, they were until recently, facing billions of dollars worth of Russian missiles every week, because they refuse to be a part of that. And so what Ukrainians are showing the world is that it is possible to stand up to tyranny. And as I've been saying lately, I mean, because I know so many Americans are, concerned about the border situation, and they're concerned about illegal immigrants in Poland and Ireland and everywhere. Ukraine is facing illegal immigrants armed with ballistic missiles and Iranian drones and actual, like, the highest level of invasion you could even imagine, and they're standing up to it. The Ukrainians showing an example to the world how to resist this, and I think the Russians want to hide it and obscure it. And I was thinking, that Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, when Putin lectured Tucker Carlson a few weeks ago, Tucker was on a podcast a few days ago, and I could start to see maybe the cracks of his, love for Putin. He said, he listened to Putin talk for 8 minutes about denazification, and even Tucker said, this is crazy. Now, the next step would be this. People like Tucker have been praising Moscow as being, they have nice train stations or subway stations. Come to Ukraine. Come to Ukraine. Like in Odessa on Saturday, hours after that horrible attack that killed children on an apartment building, I just saw a video of someone playing the piano in the street. This is a country that defines resilience, and even in the hell, they keep going. I know so many people, including Ukrainian women who don't have to be here, who moved back to Kharkiv after Russia's New Year's attacks, to say, we are going to stand in this city to say, no, you can't take it away from us. So if you come here and show this, I think you'll see the reality. And even when Brett Baer from Fox News came to Ukraine to interview Zelensky, I think we talked about this last week, but that was great. But he didn't show any scenes of Kharkiv where he was. And if you don't see it, you might think, oh, everyone's beleaguered and crawling around in the dirt and dying. No, this is a place of strength and even some kind of cheerful defiance. And if the world can see that, they can start to believe that this could actually work, but they don't see it.
Yeah, because the big hope of the world that was trying to reset relations or reset their relations with Russia for many, many years comes back all the time to the same old story, in which Joseph Stalin, one of the biggest mass murderers in the history of humankind, was called Uncle Joe. So that's the same with his successor, Vladimir Putler, a war criminal who is ruling Russia right now. Joe, we are actually out of time, but I want you to give us a quick update on the fundraisers and on the way that people can support you and actually the people who you support by your presence and your activity in Ukraine. You got 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, it is incredibly difficult at the front line. And so while, we're still trying, the Ukraine's trying to get long-range weapons to make a difference here, the soldiers are holding on. One way where we can protect them is by getting drone jamming backpacks. And so right now we have a fundraiser for these drone jammers that will hopefully, keep as many Russian drones away from Ukrainian soldiers and medics as possible. So we welcome support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. All support there, UkrainianFreedomNews.com, and we're going to get a bunch of these drone jamming backpacks to guys at the front line into places like Kramatorsk, where I was just last week.
Guys, that's, I say sorry to my viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, you can support the Ukrainian resistance against the Russian aggression in this way, in this manner. Joe just gave you the information how you can find it online. We do support this heroic fight for the liberation of Ukraine against the Russian aggression, the state that wants to grab and control the whole world, basically, because that's the ideology which is behind Putler's war, and it didn't change at all since the times, or since actually the creating of the big October Revolution, which brought 200 million victims all around the world for more than 100 years. Joe, thanks a lot. See you soon.
Michal, thanks. And remember, Russia's second annual winter offensive has failed. We can declare that definitively. Thank you.
We should just underline it and put it in the bold in our textbooks. Joe, thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. If you do want to join us, here's our rackracon.com Substack. You can find us over there. You can leave us your email, and we'll get back to you with the reports from various front lines of the ongoing war against the West that we try to report on our program. We come back tomorrow. Stay safe. Ciao, ciao. Bye.